Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's webinar. My name's Eleanor Robson, and I'm the director of the Nahrein network. And with me are Dr. Mehiyar Kathem and Dr. Jafar Josari and Zainab Mahdi. And we're going to spend a while talking about the grant scheme. We're going to record that. And after we finished our presentation, we'll stop recording and there'll be lots of opportunities for you all to ask questions. So this webinar is going to be in English. If you'd rather hear all of this in Arabic, then tomorrow night, Dr. Jafar will be leading a webinar on this, exactly the same topic tomorrow. So this will be in English this evening. Okay. I am going to start recording. Oh, it is recording already. We've done that already. Good. So let me tell you what we're going to do this evening. I will say a few words about the Nahrein network for people who are not familiar with our work. I'll explain more about the Research Grant Award Scheme, because that's why we're here. And then Dr. Mehiyar will talk in the middle of this about how to complete the application form itself. Very importantly, I'll talk about how we assess the applications and decide which projects to fund. And at the end of that, we'll stop recording. And if you have questions for us, then please do ask them at any time using the Q&A function in Zoom. And we'll pick them up and we'll come to you, come back to them then. Okay, so let's begin. So I know a lot of you know us already. We have been operating for 4 years now. For the first 4 years, we were funded by the British government, but now we are very fortunate to have given private money by a very generous philanthropist to my university, to the University College London. And our mission is to help put Iraqi researchers at the centre. Oh, beg your pardon, my slide's going far too fast. Let me stop. I don't know what's happening here. Sorry. I thought I had everything under control. Let me go back. Our mission is to put Iraqi researchers at the centre of our project in order to research and create new knowledge about Iraq's past, but to use that knowledge to make Iraq a better place for people who are living in it today and in the future. So how can history, cultural heritage, and the humanities subjects related to those two topics contribute to making Iraq a better place to live, a more stable society, a more prosperous society, and one that can cope with the increasing climate emergency. So we do 3 things. We help build research capacity through visiting scholarships to the UK, and our new scheme will launch for that in the new year. We fund 1 graduate studentship every year to come to UCL, and we offer also a research development programme, which will be also starting in the spring. We also advocate with decision makers in UK and Iraqi ministries and embassies. We work with big international think tanks, and we work with other funders to help them understand why heritage and the humanities and history matter in Iraq, and how they can support properly Iraqi researchers to do the research that needs to be done. And then the third element that holds all that together, of course, is our own research research and the research that we fund in Iraq by expert local researchers. And that's what we're here to talk about today, of course. So we don't constrain the exact topics on which people research, but we do have very clear set of research aims. The first one, because we're interested in history, is historical. How can we collectively better understand how it's come to be that Iraqi researchers have been largely excluded from the big international research discussions around Iraq's past, its present and its future. Then, equally importantly, we help the people involved in that work be involved in those conversations now, and their expertise be acknowledged and made visible internationally. They're not just researchers in universities, but we also help heritage organisations like the State Board of Antiquities and Heritage, NGOs, local work, how they can serve the needs of people in Iraq better. And then very connected to this, of course, is the idea that people working in heritage and history and the humanities have good jobs to go to. So how can we support the next generation? And, oh, I beg your pardon. I don't know what's gone on with my slides, why they're charging through so fast. Let me just say, bring wisdom back. Sorry, they obviously want me to talk faster. How we can then use this research not only to help the next generation of professionals in the field and experts and researchers in the field, but how all of this research can help Iraq become a better place to live, both socially and economically, but also in the context of the climate emergency, with water, with temperatures rising, etc. So the next part of the talk is in a little bit more detail about the grants that we offer. So if you have worked with us in the past, you'll know we operate on 3 different types of grants. We are keeping the same amounts of funding, so up to £10,000 for people who've not worked with us before, or perhaps you have worked with us before but just want a small amount of money to do a small project over a 12-month period. The small grants up to £30,000 over a year and a half, again for Iraqi researchers, and then the large grants, which can either be just for Iraqi researchers or can involve international collaborators for 2 years, but the constraint is there that most of the money must be spent in Iraq. We have 2 funding deadlines every year, and they will be running for the next 10 years. So I will say again and again, there is no rush to put in an application next month. It's really important that you understand that lots of opportunities will be coming, and we will not be spending all the money by any means this time around. So what do we fund? We fund research projects. And by this, we mean projects that create new knowledge. They don't just do things, or we don't fund projects that restore buildings or conserve collections, or communicate with children about things that are already known. This is about research, new knowledge that is worthy of publication in an academic context. That research must be led by Iraqi researchers, and that means Iraqi or Kurdish nationals living and working in Iraq. You don't have to have a PhD, but you do need to show that you have enough knowledge and experience to run the project. So we don't fund students, for instance. But if you graduated with an MA and you've been working in a university, teaching, for instance, or working for the State Board for several years with a job, then yes, you absolutely are eligible. The work we fund, of course, must all be about Iraqi history or heritage or humanities subjects related to it. You might want to relate Iraqi history to wider things, that's fine too, but Iraq must be at the centre. Your research must address one of those 6 aims I showed in the earlier slide, but apart from that, we're interested in you telling us what matters to you in your particular context, connected to your particular research expertise. So any time, any place, any research approach that you want to take, but you must explain to us why that research approach is important. And again, I must emphasize, it is really about how this work can improve life in Iraq. So we can't fund research that is simply about publishing in an academic journal. You do need to think about how you translate that research into events, activities, resources, conversations with decision makers that will improve society, economy, culture, and environment. And that could be really, really small and local. That's fine. You don't have to think on a national scale, but something that will make somebody's life better is what we're looking for. So, as I said, small and starter grants, so for £10,000 or £30,000, you must be an Iraqi or Kurdish researcher. You need a PhD or have equivalent experience. You need to demonstrate that you're working for an organisation that can support you in Iraq and that is officially registered. So we will expect you to show documentation to us that you have the approval of your employer to do this research. We've had problems in the past where this hasn't happened and we've had, unfortunately, to withdraw the funding. We really don't want that because it makes everybody very unhappy. And then for larger grants, you can apply if you have completed a project with us in the past 4 years and shown that you can manage a project well. Or you could be a member of an international team, so somebody with a PhD or equivalent experience who works in the UK or America or Europe or another Middle Eastern country. But if you are not Iraqi, then you must have at least one Iraqi member of your leadership team, and you must show that they have been involved in the research design. What we can't fund is people who want simply to use Iraqi team members as their assistants. It's really important. The whole aim of this project, as you've seen from my previous slide and our research aims, is to develop Iraqi expertise. So projects that don't do that are not eligible. And again, most of the money must be spent in Iraq. So there are a set of rules about the sort of costs that we can fund. Some technical terms for you. Basically, we will fund anything that you directly need to do the project. It might be your time, the time of the people working on the project, the costs of traveling around the country to do your work and then feeding yourself while you're doing that. Small amounts of equipment that you might need, but we can't fund buildings and we can't fund big equipment like cars. And any other costs that are directly associated with it, like for instance, around publication. You can, in order to enable your project to do that, the work, particularly if you're working in a setting that you're drawing on other people's sort of office space, etc., you can also ask for 20% of your staff costs to cover those extra costs, what we call overheads. Particularly international researchers, if you want to do staff buyout or have other costs, so you're estimating the amounts of costs you'll need from existing resources, then directly allocated costs to, but that probably doesn't apply to most Iraqi projects. If you're applying for money to come to Iraq, you must include your bank fees, or estimate of the bank fees for transfer money. And it's almost certain, if you're working for an Iraqi university, that it won't be possible to transfer the funds for the project directly to your institution, and we cannot transfer money to individual people's bank accounts. So you will need to set up an intermediary, which we can talk about later, and you'll need to set aside about 3% of the budget to allow for that, of the Iraqi budget. You will need to fully justify all the costs in your application, explain to us why you need the money for each different bit. And if you don't do that, we can't consider the application. And we will be expecting, for the projects that we fund, a report every 6 months, and we will need to see the receipts for the money that you spent. A couple of technical notes: if you are part of an international team wanting to apply for a large grant, so I'll emphasize again, maximum 30% of costs for the international elements of the project. And then some really boring technical details for UK applicants. If you've applied with us before, we've been working under our UK research and innovation budgeting rules. They no longer apply because we're not funded by UKRI, HRC anymore. So they are applying direct costs plus overheads. So it's really important that you check with your university's central research services scheme if this scheme is paying sufficient overheads for you, sufficient full economic costs, and whether it fits according to your own university's definition of it, the Frascati definition of sponsored research. And you will need to get that cleared well in advance before you apply. And we can't check that for you because your own university will have its own interpretation of Frascati rules. So apologies, non-UK people. So I've been talking plenty, so I am going to hand over now to Dr. Mehiyar to talk in a little bit of a more concrete way about how to complete the form, which you can find on our website. So UCL@UK/Nahrein, and if you go to research grants here, you will find, as it loads, a little video from me, the same information I've just been giving you here, a checker to check whether you're eligible or not, and you can download an application form here. When Mehiyar's talked to you about how to fill in the form, I'll then talk to you about what happens after you've submitted it. Okay, Mehiyar, over to you.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen quickly.
Mehiyar, I've got the usual headphone problem.
Is it better now?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm just going to speak for a few minutes because obviously designing a project is not easy for anyone, you know, whether it's a small grant or a large grant, but I'm going to speak about some of the main features of this project in particular. And before you even start the project, I think the best thing to do is just to get a big piece of paper and just to write everything about the kind of idea, everything about the idea you want to write about, the project you want to write about. I think it's really important that you do that. Obviously, have a look at the application with your teammates, the members of your team. So we don't fund individuals, we fund teams to work in Iraq. And that's really important. And so that kind of communication, engagement with your team members is really essential to the success of your project and its eventual effectiveness if it is funded. So I suggest that once you have had a look at the project, at the form, you'll see there are expanded sections from the form that we had previously. And I would encourage you to look at this form very carefully, to read it several times, to discuss it with your team members, and to go through it quite diligently, so very carefully to read every single part of it, because these grant cycles, rounds, are very, very competitive. And so I'd like to start with, I mean, it's a long form, but just the summary, we can start with that. So the summary really is very, very important. It's the first thing, one of the first few things that reviewers look at is the summary. What is this project about? And so try and summarize your project and work with that summary over time as you're developing the project, as you're writing it, and change it in relation to the project itself. So perhaps there are certain activities that are added, certain things that are been taken away. Try and make sure that the summary captures the essence of your project. It's 300 words, so again, very short. But I think it's really, really important because, like I said, it's the first thing that reviewers look at. Make sure that you have a research question. I think that's really important, which is basically what you want to do. You know, what are the kind of challenges that you're addressing in your research project can be answered with 1 or 2 research questions. So I think that's really important. And so I know that is in Iraq, sometimes we just, you know, Iraqis or anyone else, it's not just Iraq, people just write the project, but it's really important to actually have a vision of what your project would look like. What is your project really about? So again, the summary and the research question, they kind of work together. And again, also in terms of the aims, make sure that the project is oriented towards the 6 aims that we have. Those are on our website. Make sure you read those very carefully. So if your project is a superbly written project, but it doesn't fall under our aims, then we cannot fund it. It has to be related to the main 6 aims of the Nahrein network. Regarding methodology management, and after that I'll speak about ethics and also quickly about the budget. I think it's something that is often not looked at properly. So you have to make sure that the methodology that you use is relevant to the question and to the overall research that you are pursuing in this project. So what do we mean by methodology? Well, how are you going to tackle the research question? What kind of data will you use? And so we find here also, you know, how you, this is the first question, 10.1, how you set out to answer the research question. Again, looking at methods. So this is more like not necessarily just the approach, but more so like the actual things you're going to do in terms of data collection and how you manage the information that will come out from this research. Again, we as Nahrein Network would encourage you to make sure that every single member of your team is contributing to the project, and that there are and it's very clear. You have to make sure that every single member is contributing in relation to their own expertise. So that needs to be very clear. And so, of course, we, as Nahrein Network, we encourage interdisciplinary approaches. So different disciplines, different expertise coming together to tackle a research question. So we are very much looking forward to projects like that. If you like, not looking at your classical or conventional projects, but looking at the diversity of different approaches and expertise that come together in your project, that make your project unique or different, or can stand out from other projects because it brings together all the different elements or you know, experiences from your community, from your team members. So again, identifying team members that contribute to the project is very, very important. Remember that. It's very, very important that the team members are qualified and they are capable. And this is their field. I think that's really, really important, that this is the field that they are already working in, or that they are negotiating in terms of building up a research record, or looking into in terms of if it's a new, so slightly different field, but it's within the broader expertise they have, then that could, of course, that could be something that we encourage a lot. And so, again, we have a lot of questions here. Policies, approaches will be in place to prevent, and these are again the kind of the policies and you know, the kind of risks. Really, it's about risks. This 10.4. You have to make sure you list all the risks in the project, and they could be small risks. So there could be risks associated with your institution. There could be risks associated with the project implementation in, you know, in the field, you know, out there, if you like. I think that's really important. And I think it's really important when a reviewer looks at this, they understand that you've, as a project team, you've understood the risks. So it's really, really important to put the risks and to list them in a very clear way. So risk 1, risk 2, 3, 4, and 5, you know, and it means that you're showing to the reviewer, so the person that's going to review your project, that you've actually understood and appreciated all the risks in your project, which are in Iraq, of course, there are many. Generally speaking, there are many risks in Iraq. We know that, but please list them. In terms of ethics, so moving on from number 10 to number 11, and I'm focusing on these points because they've been expanded from the previous application, but they're very, very important in the context of Iraq. So ethics, again, what are the ethical implications of your project? Does it affect anyone in particular? Will it, for instance, if you're doing interviews with people who have suffered some kind of trauma or some kind of whatever issues they've, you know, in a context like Iraq, you have to spell that out. You have to describe the ethical considerations of your project. And ethics is a very broad term. And I suggest that you speak, if we're referring to universities, you speak to the ethical committee or the ethics committee in your university. It's very, very important you have that discussion, or also have it with your team members. And of course, like I said, also regarding risks, when you sit down with your team members, these are the kind of things you need to be discussing and to be listing and describing. So again, group work is really, really important for this, for these elements of the project. Again, outputs, you have to be very clear about your outputs. You know, what are you doing? You know, what are you achieving? What are you realizing in your project? And they have to be very clear. And the Nahrein network has a broad definition of outputs, as it's described here. So they could be workshops, they could be student research, they can be practice-based research, they could be exhibitions, podcasts, research papers, obviously very important. So those are the kind of things that we are looking for. And so make sure that your outputs are relevant and are to your overall project. And make sure that you can achieve them. So I know, we all know Iraq is a difficult place to work in, but make sure the outputs are achievable within the time frame of your project. So I'll quickly go through some other parts. Beneficiaries. And because of the nature of our project, Nahrein Network, and the focus on social impact and development goals, you really have to describe who are the beneficiaries of your project. Who's going to benefit? Is it an academic group? Is it a master's student? Are there PhD students? Is it a community or a section of society? Is it a museum? So those are beneficiaries. And I think it's really important that you describe that because actually it helps you to make the point that your outputs are going to support a certain part or whatever it is that you're looking at, the key objectives. So of course, make sure your outputs are very clear because if they're not very clear, then you won't be considered seriously, because the outputs are really the sum, if you like, the summary, the sum of your project. So I think that's really important to note. Be very smart, be very careful, go slow in terms of thinking about these things. So don't rush it. So don't just quickly say, I'm going to take 10 webinars. Think about the logistics of that. 10 webinars, 10 seminars, 10 research papers. You can't really do that within the time scale, perhaps within the time scale that you have. So make sure that you can discuss this in terms of a timeline and what kind of outputs you can implement within that timeline. So ideally, you should have a timeline of what kind of outputs that you'll have. So again, think about those things very, very carefully. I know I'm rushing through this, but I think those are some of the important points that have been, from my own experience in working with Iraqi researchers. And now I'll speak briefly about the budget, but just very, very briefly. Okay. Eleanor spoke about the budget. Again, you'll be judged on the budget. So your project has to have reasonable costs, whether it be in terms of salaries, whether it be in terms of equipment. And like Eleanor has said, we cannot support the purchase of large, expensive equipment. Eleanor gave the example of a car, but it could be like a $10,000 camera, or a drone worth many thousands of dollars. That's not what we do. So I think it's really important to understand that the costs, again, discuss this with your team members. They have to be reasonable. And so again, you have to justify the costs. So on the right-hand side here, you have to type in, you have to say, these are the costs, and then describe what these costs are for. And again, there are other costs. There are travel, subsistence, equipment. I mean, we can pay for things like a small camera or a laptop, but again, they have to be reasonable. And that's something that you and your team members have to judge. And so also, yeah, I think the next section after that, so the budget, and also to look at the partners. So if you have partners, also that there's a section here specifically for your partners. I know some of the previous projects we funded had multiple partners. So they had more than one partner. And now in this form, in this application, we've sort of broken it down. So it's really important to speak about the different partners and their role in the project, and their, we have here the name of the partner organization, division or department, if it's a university, name of contact. Again, it's in the very, spirit, if you like, of the application. Try and break your project down according to the different sections. And so if you're working with a partner, make sure that they are properly accounted for in terms of the budget. Other funding sources, again, this is very important. So, and I also like to underline that some projects, sometimes there's overlap. And so some people apply for the same projects in a way, not the same projects, but the same topics in the same area. So go onto our website and look at what we funded before. Most likely, we will not fund the same projects again. So for instance, if we've funded, and we have funded a project on Marsh Arab dialects in Lahwar, in the south of Iraq, most likely we're not going to fund that project again, unless it's fundamentally different. So again, look at our website, and also look at, and in this section in particular, looking at other funding sources. So, is this project also funded in part by another institution? I think it's really, really important that there is no sort of double funding, if you like, no double funding. So it's a unique project. So the project that is submitted to the Nahrein network is a unique project. It's an original project. We can take questions and answers, but I think those are the main points that I have. But there are so many other things in the application. But the way we've designed it is that we've broken it down. So we've made it easy or easier to think about the project. So in a way, the different sections is about your thought process, about the project cycle, about the different aspects of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mehiyar. Right, so let me go back to our website where you can just remind you where the form is. And Zainab, I wonder if you could just post a link to this form in the chat for everybody. That would be really helpful, I think. So I hope, why is that not showing? Are you seeing? Hang on a minute, I think you're seeing the wrong screen. No, you are seeing the right screen. Yes, you are, great. Sorry about this. There we are. So on the page, on the research grants form, just to remind you, you can watch a quick summary of what we've been talking about. There are the descriptions of who is eligible, and you can check your eligibility on this page with a form, which was going to take a little while to load. But when it loads, there we are. It will take you through who are you, what sort of grant are you applying for, what do you want to do. That will help you see what you're eligible for. Then later in the page, there are links to download the application form there and there. There are instructions on what you need to do. So you'll need to get together lots of different documents, and you need to make them as a single PDF. And then you go to submit your application here or at the link on the left. And there is another form that will talk you through all the bits that you're doing and ask you to just to check that you've got everything there. And then when you are ready to submit, there is a Dropbox for you to send it to. So please, no emailed applications. It comes to our Dropbox so that we don't lose any applications. We get a lot of email, and unfortunately once or twice in the past we've lost applications because they came in at a very busy time, or they came in bits and pieces and we missed one piece because it came in a separate email. So we will only accept applications that come through the Dropbox. So what happens after you've submitted? let me tell you about how we choose. So the most important thing to know is that we only have 10 grants available for this coming year. So in November and in May, in total, we will be funding 10 projects. And we will get far more than 10 applications. We always do. We have 20, 30, 40 applications in every round when we're funding about 5 projects. So it's really important to remember this, that we can only fund the very best projects. That's because we have limited money, but also because we support every project we fund. We have limited time and we want to give the best support to the best projects. So how do we decide what are the best projects? Well, you'll see it on our website, and I'll explain now. Each project we work out which are eligible to be considered and which are ineligible or which are incomplete. And then we assign each project 2 expert assessors, and they read the applications independently of each other, and they write a short report. They look at the research itself. How good is the research that you're proposing? How valuable is it? What use will it be? And how urgent is it? How well does it fit with our own aims? So, as Mehiyar said, if it's the best project in the world, but it doesn't support heritage, history, and related humanities subjects to make Iraq a better place, then we can't fund it. We also want to see, are you the right people to do this job? So again, you might have a brilliant project, but if you don't have any experience in doing this sort of research, then we can't fund you on that. And again, really importantly, you may have a brilliant idea, but we need to see how realistic it is, how well you've thought about getting the project finished in the time and the money that we would give to you if we funded you. So your management plan, your timetable, your budget are all really, really important. And then how will you communicate your research? So 2 elements to this, the academic side, the research side, but also how do you make a difference? So you can't just publish in an academic paper and hope that somebody will read it one day and will change the world with it. How will you communicate with the people whose lives you want to be better, or who are responsible for making those lives better? So it might be your local government, it might be a community group, it might be your MP. I don't know, there are lots of different ways to do this. Lots of people have different ideas. So think about that. And then think about how this is actually going to make a difference in the long term. How can you make it impactful and sustainable? Now that will vary. So a small project could have a very small impact, but a bigger project, well, large grants we expect to be seriously make a difference. So all of this will depend on whether you're applying for a small starter grant or the small grants or the large ones. So our 2 experts will read independently and write their judgments. And then the management committee meets about a month after the application date and considers all the reports from the assessors, and they discuss them, rank them, and then choose the best of the applications to be funded. So we will notify everybody about a month after the deadline who has been successful and who hasn't. Sometimes we can't fund projects because they are not quite ready to be fundable. And in that case, we will give you advice on how to make it better and encourage you to submit in another round. That does not guarantee we will fund you in that next round, but we will give you support to have another go. We can't give feedback on ineligible projects, however. So I'm going to finish off then just with a couple of pieces of advice, just to summarise. Read and follow all the guidance on the website and in the application form. We can only accept one application per person. So if you submit more than one, we are going to ignore everything except the first one, because we simply don't have the capacity to deal with lots of applications and we don't have enough money. If you submit an incomplete application, that's your responsibility and we can't consider it. We'll only be funding about 5 projects this time and 5 projects next time. So best ideas, best plan, most clearest budget, really important. And as Mehiyar says, there is no rush. We are going to be running this scheme for the next 10 years, twice a year. So take your time, stop and think. It doesn't matter if you haven't finished thinking on the 15th of November. Don't submit a bad application on the 15th of November in that case. Say, okay, there's another deadline on the 15th of May. So let's work more at this, get it really good and submit it then. And make sure part of that process is collecting all the documents you need from your employer and from your partners and from the people that will be supporting you financially with the transfers, etc. You will need all of that in order to submit. So it's really important that you do all of this. So don't rush, plan ahead. And the more you spread things out, the better chance you have of getting funded from us. So, and we really do want to support really good projects. The work that our teams have been doing in Iraq over the past 3 years have been amazing. And that's really, really exciting for us. And we really want to see more research like this. So let me just finish off by reminding you what you can do on the website. You can read the guidance, you can check if you're eligible, you can download an application form, you can submit your application there. If there are any questions, we can talk about that now when we stop recording. But if after this webinar you realise that there's a question that you want to ask and you haven't asked us, email us and one of our team will answer it. So don't email us individually, please. Email it to Nahrein and then our administrator, Orana, will send it to the right person to answer the question. So email in English or Arabic or Kurdish as you like. And then lots of social media, I'm sure you know, Facebook and Arabic. English is for Twitter. Instagram does a bit of both. This will be posted on YouTube so that you can watch it again. We've got good podcasts if you're interested in hearing more about past work we've funded. We've got some great interviews and webinars on, webinars on YouTube and great interviews with previous project leaders on SoundCloud. And we've just set up a new email list as well, which Zainab will subscribe you to by joining this. And again, you're free to unsubscribe if you want, but you'll get more information that way. So thank you for listening. I know I can see lots of questions coming up. So let's ask Zainab to stop recording now and we'll move into questions. Thank you. And I'm going to unshare my screen now.